Educator Effectiveness Committee, I call this meeting to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Appel, Dr. Armstrong, Mr. Birkin, Mr. Castile, Ms. Champagne. She is here. She's here. Dr. Clark,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
She said champagne.
Mr. Hollis, Ms. Holloway, Ms. Mallory, Mr. Morris.
Here.
And Ms. Altier. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item, please.
Madam Chair, if I could, point
Of
of
course.
privilege. You have done a good job in the past of recognizing efforts by the State Department of Education, and I really appreciate that. And I know tomorrow that we're going to be recognizing a number of different groups. But I just want to take this opportunity to recognize the staff at the State Department of Education. They normally sit in this part of the room throughout that section, and so I just want to take this time just to really recognize that group. I know I speak for the full board. We appreciate all the hard work. We appreciate the spirit of collaboration, and we know that together that we're really making a difference, working with our teachers and our school districts to add value to our students' life. So just really appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. I concur and agree with that. And since we,
Also, I wanted to recognize this purple bag that each of us received when we were seated today. I know there was some work that went into that, some creativity, and just wanted to acknowledge that effort and say thank you as well.
Thank you very much. And just to piggyback on that, I do want to recognize, in one of my districts, New Orleans, I did ask LDOE to come and present on accountability. And so our state superintendent, Dr. Cade Brumley, Dr. Jenna Chason, and Mr. Thomas Bradford, I'm sorry, not Mr. Thomas Bradford, Mr. Thomas Lambert came down and did a 2-hour presentation to one of our school districts with about 120 school leaders, superintendents, board members, and you guys did an excellent job in providing information and allowing people to ask questions. So thank you for going above and beyond, as usual, for all of our educators and teachers in the state. Thank you. First item, please.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 5.1 through 5.11 and pulling item 2.1. Motion?
Okay, motion. Mr. Appel first. Mr. Morris second. Discussion, questions? Objections? Motion passes. Next item, please.
Okay, so your first item is going to be on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of an update report regarding the Teacher Certification Appeals Council. The recommendation is to receive.
Motion. Ms. Champagne and Mr. Birkin, second. Discussion, questions?
We have public comment.
We have one comment card. Kahanda Corley, and I should know this name by now. Karanda. As many times as you said it. I'm trying.
Good afternoon. Oh, yeah, it's afternoon now. Great afternoon, Karanda Corley, parent and global disabilities advocate, and my son Corinth is a future self-advocate, learning from the best. And I just want to speak about this report. So often we have these appeals as it relates to teachers when it comes to certification, and a lot of the Bessie Board don't understand that sometimes some of these individuals are being brought because they have abused children like my child in the classroom, and our families do not get the opportunity to participate or give our comment as it relates to why some of those individuals should not get their credentials recertified. In fact, our state does not have actual running database as currently that exists that actually shows what staff members have been terminated from one school system and go and get employed with another. And if we had a database like that, it could prevent situations like what happened in East Baton Rouge Parish, where a teacher was terminated from working at Episcopal, and he got hired by East Baton Rouge Parish School System, and he started soliciting and propositioning female students to have a baby with them. Another instance was an individual that was currently had litigation against him for pulling a gun out on individuals in Walmart. That individual was hired and was in the classroom with elementary school kids. And the kids recognized him from his photo from him being incarcerated. And they were able to tell their parents that that was their teacher. So these situations can be prevented if we, one, create a database, but two, look at those individuals and look at all of the information for why that individual is up for a recertification as it relates to being appealed. Some of them have actually stolen money from school systems. And so I think that this opens up the conversation of what does teacher certification appeals look like? What is it that the council is actually really supposed to do? Because I want teachers to actually be able to safely teach, but I also want my child who is nonverbal to actually be able to go in a classroom and really learn in an environment that is free of abuse. And so making sure that someone that is actually in his classroom that is qualified and credentialed and certified, but also has no criminal past, is extremely imperative. And I know St. Tammany School System is another that actually go and they will get their staff member to sign paperwork saying that they no longer work for them after they have been arrested. And so too often times that information never come to you when you're looking at recertification, but I think it should be. And I think it should be a real spelled out criteria as it relates to the teacher certification, but also it should be a real criteria as it relates to those long-term substitutes that are being placed in the classroom for children with disabilities. And I think that this teacher certification appeals council would be a great way to look at it. Also, those that are going through the process of being groomed to be teachers that are actually working up under an actual certified teacher, but it's not being closely monitored. That is something else that I think that this council should look at, and that we should be extremely transparent with everyone that is here and all of the families, because I do believe, if my numbers are correct, Dr. Brumley could correct me, but we have over 800,000 kids that are in the public school system. And 1/4 of that population is children with disabilities. And so I do think that we need to make sure that we have a real, true, meaningful way that we have people in the classroom, but we also make sure that the staff is safe as well as the kids are safe.
Thank you, Ms. Carly. Any questions? Comments? Any objections? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 8, item 3.1, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to legislation of the 2024 regular legislative session and the Let Teachers Teach work group. The recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to bulletins 103, 111, 126, 130, 741, and 741 non-public. Additional backup has been distributed.
Okay, motion. Mr. Appel, Ms. Champagne. Discussion question?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Clark. Look, we set off at the beginning of this calendar year with a simple goal of just trying to make the teaching profession just a little more manageable and certainly more fulfilling for the educators that deserve that work. Outside of the parent or guardian, there's truly nothing more important than a high-quality teacher for every student across the state of Louisiana. And so we developed a group of about 30 educators, and I want to thank Dr. Clark for being a participant and listening in on this process. And we charge them with looking at excessive paperwork and onerous trainings, looking at the actual art of the teaching profession, and looking at disruptions that keep them from teaching and other students from learning. And we really wanted this to be action-oriented and not just an exercise for the sake of going through an exercise. And after a period of several months and under the leadership of Callie Altier, our State Teacher of the Year, who accepted my request to chair the work group, we pushed forward a set of 18 teacher-friendly recommendations that we would like to see go into effect. And all of these, mind you, keep student outcomes at the forefront of the profession that we're seeking to elevate. Certainly, teachers deserve to be paid fairly, and there will be a time and place for additional conversations around that. But these recommendations tackle those issues that I previously mentioned. And so what we bring to you today is a package of recommendations that are aligned with the work of the Let Teachers Teach work group that truly do elevate the profession. I'm asked from time to time in various ways, is there anything you can do to just make the job a little bit easier for teachers? And so I think with these recommendations, the answer is yes. And I ask that the board approve these recommendations so as teachers begin this particular school year, they are, to all extents possible, in place.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brumley. We have 3 comment cards. Ms. Corley, come on down again. We have Holly Nippler and Regina Beard. You don't mind coming up? Okay. Ms. Corley?
Good afternoon, Karonda Corley, parent and disabilities advocate globally. I think that this may be what brought the media out. As you know, we sent out a statement to the Bessie board. We sent it to Mr. Ronnie Morris, Mr. Lance Harris. It was Louisiana Center for Health Equity. It was also, which is Ms. Alma C. Stewart Allen. She's the president for that. Reverend Alexis Anderson, who is the chair for Children and Youth Committee of Louisiana Behavioral Advisory Council, and myself. And what we did was we actually took out the time to read the report from Louisiana Let Teachers Teach that Dr. Brumley just spoke about. And what was very disheartening and what was also problematic is that when they issued out the statement, they encouraged people to become stricter on discipline, but they did not take into consideration what the remaining of the report actually stated. And so when I say the remaining of what that report stated, that report focused on several areas. And the areas that it focused on was professional learning, required training, student behavior and discipline, non-academic responsibilities, curriculum and instruction, and planning. Now, for us to only focus on discipline, and we didn't focus on the antecedent of student behavior, was a problem. Because when we learned the ABCs, we learned that A is the antecedent, B is the behavior, and C is the consequence. Let me say that again for you since we like fundamentals. A is the antecedent, B is the behavior, C is the consequence. And so as Dr. Brumley did in his wonderful, nice presentation and stated how we wanted to discipline, he failed to talk about Louisiana Act 324 that was passed during this session that went into effect August 1st, but it was backdated for 30 days, where it said 30 days prior to school starting for 2024-2025 school year, every school, it didn't exclude not one, every school is supposed to put a plan in place for children that have any type of behavior or mental health issue. Have that happened? I don't think it has. I know it hasn't, and I was just saying I don't think it has to be very comical because it hasn't. And I think that that's something that this body is supposed to address. Another one was House Resolution 30, but nobody has ever published that report, and so we want that report. Also, Act 386 by Representative Tammy Phelps. That was the one that addressed truancy and all the penalties and the failure as it relates to the parents, since we're talking about this particular report. Also, you have Act 745 that was by Representative Dustin Miller and 27 other legislators that I told you about before. They talked about applied behavior analysis to be a behavior support system. My child was the model for the state. So when we talk about how it can work if we're going to utilize the actual evidence-based practices that we actually have. House Resolution 17 by Representative Laura Schlegel, who is now the chair for the House Education Committee. Her and 7 other legislators put in a collaborative effort with this body and the Department of Children and Family Services to increase mental health counseling in the schools. You also have House Resolution 46 by Representative Philip Tarver and Alonzo Knox that requests this body to prioritize policies pertaining to suicide prevention and mental health education. And that is supposed to be ruled in the promulgation authorized by Act number 686. Then you have House Resolution 114 by Representative Denise Marcel, which also increases behavioral health support and providers into these school systems that would also allow Medicaid reimbursement. So when we talk about a report, we need to come with all the facts, not just some, and leave everything out. And so I have plenty of more legislation that was passed during during legislative session of 2024 that will help all our staff, but most importantly, it's about the children, making sure that they become productive citizens, because all of us are aging daily, and we have to rely on those children to be our caregivers, our presidents, and our educators, and they won't be it if we don't address those issues now.
Thank you very much again. I also have Ms. Holly Wilder and Regina Beard. Are they still here in the audience? Yes. Oh, please come up. Yes.
Hi, my name is Regina Beard. I am going to just read what I wrote because I think that's the best way for me to be able to convey everything that I want to in my short amount of time. I am a 5th grade science and 6th grade robotics and STEM teacher. Over the past 21 years, I have taught over 3,000 Louisiana students, serving in the same district throughout my career. I'm to the point in my career where I am teaching generations. You know, I was in a parent-teacher conference, and I was explaining, you know, how my classroom runs, and the parent said, I know, I remember, I was in your classroom. So it's been a long journey. I am entering my 3rd year of Dr. Brumley's Teacher Advisory Council. I was also a member of the Let Teachers Teach work group. I love being a teacher. I love walking into my classroom and being able to do what I know I am truly called to do, while also building strong relationships with my students. Unfortunately, it has become difficult for teachers to be able to do our job. I am here to speak in support of the recommended policy changes being brought to you today that aim to ease the burdens on teachers and to let teachers teach. Students who are excessively disruptive to the learning environment should be removed from the classroom. Just this week, I witnessed a student in the hallway lying on the floor, spinning in circles, and screaming. The teacher had her door open so that she could monitor that student while also doing her best to teach the students in her classroom all at the same time. Students in the classroom have a right to learn, and teachers have a right to feel safe while teaching. In addition, it is recommended that students be placed at an alternative site for behavioral support. Educators do not desire to just kick a student out because we don't want to deal with him or her. Every behavior has a root cause. When students are placed at alternative sites, they should have access to an education as well as behavior support so that that behavior can be targeted and addressed, and then the student can return to the classroom more successful. Several of the recommendations address teacher instruction and planning. I ask that you please consider eliminating the mandate to read from a script. Direct instruction should come from high-quality instructional materials, but teachers who have proven their effectiveness in the classroom should have the personal and professional autonomy to meet the needs of students outside of that script. As a certified mentor teacher in Louisiana, I do value scripted lesson plans, especially for new teachers straight out of college. However, teachers that have proven their effectiveness in the classroom should not be given negative feedback or remarks on observations if they are not following the scripted lesson word for word. Lastly, abolishing antiquated lesson plans is a topic that I think all teachers will agree with. The reality of teaching is that we are poring over our curriculum, annotating it, making sure that we are meeting the needs of our students. To then have us copy, paste, put things in specific boxes from a specific criteria from the district is not helpful. It's simply checking off another box. When I'm able to walk into my classroom, close my door, and teach, there's no feeling like it in the world. This past Friday, I was teaching about the Statue of Liberty. I was reading a book aloud to one of my classes. I had to stop reading because it was time to go to lunch. My students were devastated. They asked if we could skip lunch, skip recess, and continue learning. That's the feeling that I want to have every single day when I walk into a classroom. These recommendations are a step in the right direction, and I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Beard. We really appreciate you. Thank you. And we have, come on up. Ms. Wilder.
Good afternoon. Okay. I don't talk in a microphone very often. Pull it close.
Please put your microphone a little closer to your mouth.
I'm just
Thank
loud
you.
usually in the classroom.
Thank you.
My name is Holly Wilder. I currently teach in East Baton Rouge Parish. I just started my 28th year of teaching.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. It's all I've ever wanted to do, and this year I was lucky enough to be able to work on the Let Teachers Teach committee. All of the recommendations that have been made are definitely steps in the right direction. Like I said, I've never wanted to do anything but teach kids. They're amazing people with interesting thoughts, insights, and experiences that shape my teaching and point of view every single day. I teach middle school math. There's nothing like a middle school math classroom. They usually hate it by the time they get to me, so changing their mindset is super important. Discipline is one of the most challenging aspects of teaching. Some seem to be naturally gifted while others struggle. However, in a lot of cases across our state each day, these discipline issues are things that no one seems to be able to conquer. There are kids that upset not only the balance in the classroom, but the peace and comfort needed in a classroom for students to learn and for teachers to actually teach. Every day, teachers craft lessons designed to interest and teach students so many rigorous and deep-reaching standards. We've all had that student who can't stop throwing pencils, who throws a tantrum after being told of a consequence of his behavior. I once taught next to a teacher who had a student who threw desks, laptops, and anything else he could get his hands on. He also was very good at ramming his desks against the wall and against the joining classroom door. When he would do that, it wasn't only the two of us that stopped teaching, but 50 students that stopped learning. And there was nothing anybody could do. He had control of the classroom, no one else. And I often wondered, if it made my co-teacher and I feel scared, how did those other 50 students feel? Not only should teachers feel safe, so should students. We often feel helpless, and when we reach outside the classroom, our administrators feel tied because of discipline being tied to our school score. So the opportunity to take the discipline off of the school score, I think, would lend a support to teachers and their administrators to make them feel more confident. I also think that it would take the emotion out of the situation. If there was a ladder of discipline or consequences that happened outside the classroom, where an administrator didn't have to say, well, I chose to do this. Someone told me I had to do this. We have to follow the law. I'll tell you, the cell phone law this year made a huge difference in my view. I always felt I owed the kids a warning when it was a school rule, but it's a law now, and I'm not a lawbreaker, so I take it. So I think we could all use that help, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wilder. And we have Ms. Kylie Adler.
All right. I just wanted to say a few words. So these recommendations, if brought to life in the way intended, have the possibility to act as a springboard for two key pillars that will reduce teacher burnout and add longevity to teaching careers. First is a message loud and clear to teachers that they have the agency to act as experts. And second is improving working conditions to lessen the stressors placed on teaching. And when I refer to agency, what I mean is that for teachers to fully be effective, they need autonomy to craft lessons that highlight their own unique teaching styles and the varied needs of their students. High-quality curriculums and pacing guides absolutely have a huge place in education. I personally will be forever grateful for the resources that were provided to me by the EBR school system when I moved to Louisiana with 2 toddlers because this sleep-deprived mom needed them to find her way in a new school. I had no time to plan lessons all on my own. Tools like this are vital for educational equality and are meant to support teachers. However, no matter how much research, time, and funding goes into these materials, they will never be able to see the children in the classroom. Curriculums teach content areas, but it is teachers that teach children. There is no pacing guide that can see a joy that a class feels when they master a new math skill with only a few problems of a lesson, and there's no teacher's guide that can see a panic on a child's face when they just need a few additional repetitions before completing a task. There's no textbook that can weave together the beautiful backgrounds and interests that change as each class comes, but teachers can. When teachers have the flexibility and trust to make the best educational decisions, it is the students that win. And the second thing I hope these recommendations can address is improving working conditions for teachers. Right now, teachers everywhere feel an immense amount of pressure, and this is not unique to Louisiana. It's teachers all across the country that are crying out for help. And when I think about teachers and students, I think about this time. My husband asked me how much I thought a bald eagle weighs, and I'm sure I'm about to make myself sound really silly in front of a lot of very smart people. But the mix of his tone just made me think that the result would be shocking. And it's got this truly fierce stature of these birds. I just assumed it would be a really huge number, so I shouted out, 100 pounds. And he immediately began to laugh as he told me they in fact only weigh 10 pounds. I was in complete disbelief because these birds are so massive and majestic, they seem to defy gravity when I see them in the air. So I Googled it, and he was in fact right, but these regal birds are built for flight because they have hollow bones and over 7,000 feathers that weigh less than 21 ounces each, so they can stay light, and as a result, they soar. So when I look at teachers right now, I see them clearly defying gravity. They are getting off the ground every day in spite of the weight they carry. No matter what happens with everything else, in the nature of the work with children, teachers will always bear the weight of 7,000 tasks as we do our best to inspire, adapt, accommodate, connect, and just be everything we can be for our students. But these feathers are feathers we take on, and so many of those feathers fill our hearts with joy every day. But I can't help but wonder what would happen if we found a way to systematically hollow out some of the weight teachers are carrying. Instead of merely struggling to stay in the air, what if we built this profession in a way where teachers can soar? And I think these recommendations do just that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That was well stated, almost. I mean, that was beautiful. Thank you. Good job. Good job. And we have one more card. Alma Stewart Allen. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
You may want to turn it on and then, yes, move it a little closer.
Good afternoon. My name is Alma Stewart Allen. I'm the president and founder of the Louisiana Center for Health Equity. We are a nonprofit organization that nonpartisan organization that advocates for children and adults, people who are experiencing disadvantages, focusing on the structural, institutional, and social disadvantages that people, or conditions that people experience. Last year before last, or last year, my organization submitted a report to the legislature on HR House Resolution 173, focusing on student behavior, mental health, and discipline. That report was put together or developed with a task force and with partners from the Southern University Law Center and also some students from LSU who were interning with me. So we had a full team of people who were working on this report. And in this report, we looked at all three of those areas. One of the areas, and one that I want to focus on, or two, is discipline, and the second is mental health. I applaud the LDOE and the teachers and educators for the work that you are doing. We wholeheartedly support teachers and believe that teachers should be able to teach in an environment that is conducive to education. We also believe that students should be able to learn in an environment that is conducive to learning. One of the findings in our report is that we have a mental health crisis in this state. Many of our students are traumatized or have been traumatized prior to COVID-19 and more so since COVID-19. And they have not fully recovered from those traumatic experiences. We know that we have work to do, I'm going to put it that way, to address the mental and emotional well-being of our students. Many of the behaviors that we see in the schools, in our education settings, are not because kids are just bad kids, it's because kids are trying to cope. They're trying to deal with the many conditions and circumstances for which they have no control over. And in many instances, what we have learned in our work is that students are further traumatized by the responses that they experience within the schools. And we have been advocating for more services and resources to address the trauma, more trauma-informed services and resources, for resources to identify those students who are struggling and who do need assistance, and that those students are assisted to get the help that they need, rather than being pushed out of the school system. The concern about the discipline and being tougher and harsher on discipline without taking into consideration the student body that we currently have. This is a different body of students than when I was a student. Fortunately, I had a much better school experience than what I'm seeing with many of the students now. And so we are advocating for addressing the needs of the students in a more holistic way, and addressing the traumatic experiences that these students have and are still experiencing. With regards to discipline, one of the findings of our report was that Louisiana has among the highest disciplinary policy, the strictest disciplinary policies, with zero tolerance, corporal punishment, willful disobedience, those types of disciplinary policies, which puts us as an outlier nationally already as it relates to disciplining students, more students being suspended from school. So we are concerned that focusing on discipline will further exacerbate that problem, and especially if we're not addressing the mental health needs, the emotional well-being of these students at least simultaneously. And so I am asking that this body consider and take a look, and I did send the report. All of you should have gotten a letter and a report from us on yesterday with a link to the report, the HR 173 report. I'm asking that you also consider the report that was submitted to the legislature last January and take those recommendations into consideration as you are deliberating and discussing these recommendations from the Let Teachers Teach. Many of them are consistent with what the teachers are asking for.
Okay.
And so I think we need to, I'm asking that we look at it more comprehensively and more holistically. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. We appreciate you. Any other questions or discussion from the board? If not, motion passes.
Any objections? Any objections?
Any objections? Motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 21, item 3.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 130, regulations for the evaluation and assessment of school personnel in response to legislation of the 2024 regular legislative session. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 130.
Motion. Mr. Castile. Ms. Champagne, second. Discussions or questions? Okay. We have one card. Ms. Corley? Ms. Corley? You coming up?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Clark. While Ms. Corley comes to the table and prepares to introduce herself to the room, I want to point out that this particular item is just the promulgation of rules from a legislative act that requires in local superintendent evaluations that 15% of the evaluations shall be based on student growth and literacy at the third grade level, and 15% of the evaluation should be based on student growth in mathematics at the third grade level. Ms. Corley, I yield to you.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley.
My apologies for my tardiness. My child has now fallen asleep. So I guess the last discussion was something that was very meaningful to him as it related to student behavior and discipline and looking at what would benefit children with mental health and behavior health. But I also would like to speak as it relates to the evaluation on the staff. Although the law passed saying that we want to look at what it looked like as it relates to the staff on English and math, what about science? We have a lot of stuff that is using computers. I know Mr. Morris has spoken before about the different things that they're doing as it relates to the computers and AI and those complexities. And so science, as we know, everybody keeps using science. We're using computers. That is all the fundamentals of science. And we're not looking at that. When you talk about Pythagorean theory and you look at physics, all of that also have a component of science, not just math. And so when you talk about literacy, in order for you to be able to read and comprehend and understand those laws of physics, you have to be able to have a reading comprehension and understanding of it. And so I think that the three go hand in hand, not just two. And so I think that we need to look at the evaluation as it relates to those three core subject matters. And then if I was to go further, what would the evaluation and assessment look like for the long-term substitutes? So oftentimes we're talking about the teachers who are in the trenches, but we're not talking about the long-term substitutes that's filling a void for the classrooms of children with disabilities that don't have teachers. We also need to look at the evaluation and the assessment as it relates to guidance counselors, because their job is to guide, to provide counseling, not to push paper and be test administrators. And that's unfortunate on what they're doing. They're not utilizing their expertise and their master's degrees in counseling because they're only administering tests. But also let's look and evaluate and assess those principals who are supposed to make sure that their staff is provided with the professional development. And then let's go a step further and let's look at the evaluation of the EDs and the educational diagnosticians and the SPED directors and the superintendents. And let's start putting people on school boards that actually have a background in education and have worked in the education arena a minimum of 7 years. Or should I say 8, since 8 is the number in the Bible that goes on to be the reflection of new beginning, since we like to be religious and blur the lines in our state. And so I say that to say that the Bible talks about if the head isn't right, the rest of the body shall perish, and that is also what we talk about in medicine. And so I think we need to incorporate in our assessments and our evaluations that if the leaders of our schools and school systems are not right, then we cannot expect those in the trenches, such as our teachers and our paraprofessionals and our long-term substitutes, to be held to a much higher standard. And so I do think that we should look at what the evaluation and assessment is going to look like in those 3 components, but also we need to incorporate access to music, where we know that there's studies and evidence-based practices that talks about how incorporating music such as Mozart and Bach and Beethoven actually help individuals with learning and comprehending. And so I think that if we talk about that and we start making it where we look at what are our school systems realistically doing to incorporate the science, the math, the literacy, and the music component, then we can actually, or the arts, then we could actually produce some well-rounded individuals in our state. And so I do look at making sure our educators can educate, making sure our students can learn, and also sharing that wealth of knowledge with our families so that we can be a cohesive team for the betterment of each and every child throughout this state. And so any questions, comments, or concerns, I am always welcome to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Corley.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other discussion or questions? Any objections? Motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 23, item 4.1, consideration of an update report regarding the Louisiana Public Interest Fellowship. The recommendation is to receive.
Motion? Ms. Holloway? Mr. Perkins?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Clark, we are excited to have Mr. Justin and Ms. Stephanie here with us today to share with the board and give an update of the work that they have completed over the last year with their public interest fellowship that we afforded to them. I know that they have many lessons learned that they'd like to share with the group. And then beyond that, we will hear from our new public interest fellow who you may know, Callie Altier, who is going to share some information. Kelly Stomps and our team, would you like to add anything to that before we begin?
Happy to. I'm Kelly Stomps. I'm with the Office of School System Relations, and I have the privilege of managing the Public Interest Fellowship Program. The fellowship allows the recipient to spend the school year advocating for a key education initiative of their choosing. As Dr. Bromley shared, Kylie Altier was named as the 2024 Louisiana Public Interest Fellow at the Teacher Leaders Summit. I would like to now ask Kylie to share a few words about her fellowship initiative.
All right. Hi, everyone, again. I just want to share just a little bit because hopefully you'll hear a lot of me over the next year. This is their day today, but as a child with dyslexia, the struggle I felt learning how to read really shaped how I viewed myself, and I constantly wondered if I was good enough or smart enough, and I carried this weight into every part of my life. And as a teacher, all I've aimed to do is make sure my students for the last 12 years don't have those questions about themselves. And when I became a mom, it was really important to me to start early with my own daughter. And in the moment that she screamed to me, "Mommy, I read that all by myself," I experienced a moment so much greater than magic, because in this moment I knew she would never have to struggle in silence as she looked around the classroom. So now, as Louisiana's Public Interest Fellowship, I get to bottle that all up and give literacy to families at no cost, thanks to you all, because learning to read is too important to be anything but free. So I'll be doing this through the distribution of literacy kits and a website, www.readwithkylie.com, and I'm so excited to share that love with other people all across the state.
Thank you, Kylie. Congratulations. We look forward to seeing the progress of your initiative. Now, I would like to ask our 2023 Public Interest Fellows, Justin Template from St. Bernard Parish and Stephanie Robertson from Tangier Parish, to give their final report regarding their fellowship initiatives. Justin will go first.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to begin by thanking the department and Bessie and everyone involved for supporting my initiative to create a writing center at Chalmette High School's campus. I'm excited to share with you the impact that those writing center has had in its first year. The writing center was staffed every period by appointment during lunch periods and after school daily. 5 faculty members and 1 instructional coach assisted with the lab. Since we opened the doors of the OWL Writing Center, lovingly known as the OWL, we have worked with students of all backgrounds, from those who graduated in 2024 as valedictorian of Chalmette High School to student service through the April Dunn Act. Some of the services that were met during the school year, we've worked with students on argumentative essays, senior research papers, world history essays, ProStart restaurant management pitches for our nationally competing ProStart team. They competed in Baltimore this year. Students writing poems, short fiction and narrative writing. Kind of an unforeseen thing was working on students for ACT, since the English section is so heavy on grammar. Really giving direct grammar instruction to those students. Strategy support for ACT and standardized testing. 2 students who were just working on a novel that is in progress. Advanced placement and dual enrollment analysis essays, as well as college application assistance. Since opening the Writing Center on August 28th, we have spent 158 hours collectively working with students on their writing in the OWL. The center has served 136 students on 368 different occasions. And I'm sorry to interrupt. This information is now outdated because we opened last week, and we have now probably had about 15 students come in. So a little outdated already, but that's how that goes. As data becomes available, the Writing Center team will examine if there's any potential correlation between lab attendance and grades and LEAP scores. It cannot be emphasized enough just how much, and I mean this sincerely, has benefited the students of Chalmette High School. And although the 2023 Public Interest Fellowship is concluding, or has concluded, the OWL Writing Lab certainly has not. Thanks to your support, this year was just year 1. With the support we've received from all of the stakeholders involved, we look forward to continuing to develop each student who walks through the doors of what was once a storeroom to say what they mean and mean what they say. Below, I will mention some goals that we are looking to progress toward this year. We want to utilize all of the furniture and the equipment purchased to establish the much requested, as we established at the Teacher Leader Summit, environment that the students requested, to involve pre-service educators from our nearest accrediting university, the University of New Orleans, potentially expand the initiative to some of the middle and elementary schools in the district, hold scheduled workshops on writing and grammar for students to attend, and finally to hold professional development sessions for faculty on how to incorporate writing instruction across the curriculum. So not just in English classrooms, but throughout. Because as I mentioned when I first proposed this initiative, and constantly say, to the point that I'm sure people are tired of hearing me talk about it, writing to me is the most, of course I'm biased, but the most essential skill to accomplishing what one wants to in life and in any content area in which they are working or studying. So again, I can't say it enough. Thank you all so much. And now to Stephanie.
Thank you, Justin. It's incredible how much your work has progressed, and we look forward to seeing the impact this next year. Now, Stephanie is going to share her report.
Thank you. And to echo Justin, thank you for this amazing opportunity. It's been really eye-opening, and I've learned a lot. I started this fellowship project, The Power of Music Research on Music Education Programs in Louisiana, as was initially to give a comprehensive overview of music education across the state, but it kind of turned into this resource project. There was research into policy surrounding music education, as well as networking with a lot of the fellow music educators in Tangipahoa Parish and surrounding areas. And through this survey, this focus, I developed a survey And so the 3 surveys, one was for music educators, one was for school principals, and then one was for a school system representative, just to kind of see where they were, what they had, what resources they may have needed, and so forth. And so it was sent out, and the LMEA, the Louisiana Music Educators Board of Directors, helped me to get that out to the different people. I had about 209 responses from 32 parishes, so not quite what I wanted, but it was something to get started with. And basically, when asked about thoughts, needs or resources, the majority of the answers were more support from the school and school system leaders, an understanding of the importance and the impact of music education for students in Louisiana, and also funding for the programs. So upon completing the survey, I found that there was this need for a kind of one-stop shop for music educators and other stakeholders to find the tools and resources, so to help with being able to find funding, to help advocate for people who maybe wanted to start programs, to find here are the steps to be able to start programs, or the people to reach out to in order to help them to be able to start programs in their area. And so I created in April 2024 and launched what I call Music Teach. And so this website, it's an expanding resource that I'm still working on and developing, that offers links and resources for music educators and the like regarding professional development opportunities, mentoring opportunities, advocacy resources, grant opportunities, research articles, curriculum resources, suggestions, and more. It's also a space where music educators can share their ideas, resources, tips, and the like. Resources are being added in the hopes that this will be easier and a more efficient way for music educators and other stakeholders to find help and support. There's a link on the website that you can go to where people who maybe want to have something on there or share a resource, they can request that, and we'll get it up there. And even though the fellowship is complete and this is done, it's just the beginning, as I am going to continue to work to push and help and aid as I can and advocate for the importance of music education and the arts in the schools. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Stephanie. As you said, this is just the beginning. Now, both Justin and Stephanie have completed reports, final project guidance reports that will be shared on the department's awards page later this week, so you could see the outline of all the steps they took throughout the fellowship this year. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Templet and Ms. Robertson, for your services, the initiatives that you implemented. You did a great job. And Ms. Adler, we look forward to working with you this year coming up and hearing more about your initiative that you're going to implement. Thank you very much. Any other questions or concerns from the board? Any objections? Motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 26, item 4.2, consideration of an update report regarding the educator evaluation system. The recommendation is to receive.
Motion, Ms. Mellorin. Mr. Birkin.
Thank you.
Discussion, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Clark.
Dr. Brumley, I hadn't even said that part yet, though. I was getting there.
I'm trying to work on efficiency.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Look, we have used the same educator evaluation system for many years, a decade probably plus. And one of the things that we wanted to do is to update that particular system and try to move to a system that is more than a checking of the box type of situation, and more of a responsive coaching type evaluation and observation model. And so we have spent considerable time over the last few years working through that. The other thing that we wanted to accomplish is to create a differentiated approach to evaluation and observation, recognizing that some teachers may not need as many observations, evaluations over the course of the year as others, which could allow them to be honored, but also principals to be able to have finite time to work with teachers who are struggling or maybe new teachers. And so the reason that you have this item before you today is anytime you have an evaluation system that's going to affect 50,000 employees, you're naturally going to get questions about this in your district. You're naturally going to hear a concern. You're naturally going to hear something that's going well. But we just wanted to take this opportunity to inform the board a little bit more about this evaluation model so you have background as you enter those conversations, but also make sure that the public has some stronger awareness around the move to this new model. And so I asked Dr. Chasson to put together a presentation for you today just to be helpful as you have those conversations back in your districts. So Dr. Chasson.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. Jenna Chasson with the Department of Education, and I'm happy to share with you some updates around our new Louisiana evaluation system. Back in March of this year, you all approved policy in Bulletin 130, and so this is really an update, as Dr. Brumley said, of the implementation of that policy to let you know where we are now. This improved system is purposefully named LEADS, which stands for the Louisiana Educator Advancement and Development System. And this name is really consistent with the vision for our new evaluation system that's really focused on the growth and development of our educators to in turn be able to grow our students. I have seen and lived firsthand the power of coaching and feedback to enhance teacher effectiveness and practices. So I could not be more excited about this new system. I want to start by just overviewing some things that we really wanted to address in what we call now our legacy system, Compass. As Dr. Brumley said, that system was over a decade old, and although it served its purpose at the time, there were really some things about it as we really did widespread surveying and focus groups of our educators across the state over the last 3 years that we knew we wanted to address in this new system. And so we recognized that the legacy system lacked a comprehensive rubric. This is something we heard time and time again. It was originally created as parts of a more comprehensive rubric, and it also did not have embedded ongoing support. It lacked follow-up into classroom practices following the observation. It only included in the rubric certain instructional domains, and it did not include a professionalism component, and that was something that we heard was really desired by a lot of leaders in our state. It also provided a one-size-fits-all approach, regardless of strong evidence that a leader may have had that a particular teacher was highly effective, meaning that if you had a struggling or a new teacher, they received the same number of observations and support as a highly effective teacher in this system. And so those were some of the things that we were looking to address in this new system. And so several years ago, we began an extensive request for proposals or RFP process. And through that, we were able to contract with the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, also known as NIET, to assist with reimagining our Louisiana evaluation system. And NIET has done this work in many other states before. And so they were awarded through that process to be our partner in this work. This transition to an improved system is spanning over the course of 3 years. We had a pilot that was completed last school year during 23-24. This year is known as the learning year, 24-25, and we're looking forward to full implementation in 25-26. The new system is based on evidence-based practices, includes a fair and transparent process that desires to give teachers a voice in their own evaluations. This was something we heard from our educators. And it leads to more actionable feedback in the classroom and ties to professional learning. This was truly a missing component of our overall vision for teaching and learning in our state. We were really missing a strong, comprehensive tool to give us a shared common language around best practices in instruction. And so this is absolutely filling a missing piece of that puzzle for us. The rubrics that will now be used in observation were developed in collaboration with NIET, and they're based on the NIET Teaching and Learning Standards rubric and Principal Standard rubric. But now these new rubrics include Louisiana-specific language and connections. The counselor rubric was created alongside NIET to evaluate the important work of counseling that we know we need our school counselors doing. We did have a number of systems who were already using the original NIET rubric. Leading into this school year, we had nearly 40% of our traditional districts by choice opting to use the original NIET rubric. And we had 12 charter networks or schools also opting in to use it. And so though we are shifting a large portion of the state, some of the state was already using this tool, or a very similar tool, the original tool. Over the past decade, we have implemented statewide initiatives designed to support continuous improvement of teaching and learning across the state. You know, one of the things that Louisiana began doing over a decade ago is the adoption and implementation of high-quality instructional materials. We've also supported over the last several years our schools with implementing structures for professional learning, including instructional leadership teams, teacher collaborations, and building career pipelines. Our new educator evaluation system builds upon these foundations of high-quality instructional materials and professional learning structures that now exist. Previously, with the legacy system, the training was asynchronous and the responsibility of the school or school system mostly. LEADS now offers a more comprehensive required training for evaluators. All first-time evaluators must attend a face-to-face training prior to evaluating. Trainings began in June of this year and will be offered throughout this school year, our learning year. Training will also be offered annually for any new evaluators. Each training has a required assessment that must be passed in order to be able to serve as an evaluator. Evaluators must pass the assessment annually in order to remain in good standing. Because many of our systems, as I mentioned a few moments ago, were already using the original NIET rubric, we were able to produce a one-day training for those evaluators who were already considered in good standing. This really became an abbreviated refresher for those school systems and really highlighted some of the Louisiana-specific components that we added into it. LEADS keeps some components from the legacy system, and it also updates others. One significant shift that you all may hear about that I wanted to make sure to highlight here today is the shift in scale. And so the legacy system Compass is based on a 4-point scale. Effectiveness is now transitioning to a 5-point scale, with 3 being proficient and rock solid. NIET research on correlations between the educator rubric and student achievement is consistent with research in that an educator who is consistently teaching at that proficient or 3 level will impact student learning to meet the expected 1 year's growth target, meaning that a teacher earning a 3 is growing the vast majority of their students by 1 year, which is what all of our teachers I know intend to do. Because this system is designed to grow instructional and leadership skills, it will call attention to exemplary performance. However, most educators will live in the proficient range and visit the highly effective and exemplary categories where we strive to be when we can. The 5-point scale is going to give more room for growth. It will be important to stress this concept, as many of our educators may be accustomed to receiving higher scores on this 4-point scale, and they may not receive as high of scores on this new 5-point scale.
Dr. Chasson, I want to interrupt you for a moment. I think this is an important point for the board to hear, because oftentimes, or many times, teachers will have received an evaluation. It will say satisfactory, 5, all good, no issue. And potentially for the first time on this new model, they may get a 3.0, 3.2, and that is rock solid proficient. That is growing a student, a year's worth for a year's worth of instruction, more or less. But it will be alarming to a teacher that's always been a 5 out of a 4 out of a 4. So I just wanted to make sure I was making the point here that we need to encourage teachers, if they do fall in that proficiency range, that we help them appreciate and understand that that is rock solid educational practices. Thank you, Jen.
Madam Chair. Yeah. I had a question on that one too. This is a point that LDOE has brought to the board's attention on a number of occasions. So I appreciate the sensitivity and the messaging to teachers, because it's extremely important. But I'm wondering what you guys have experienced in other states or districts where this has already been implemented with regard to the board's interpretation of the data whenever we get it back. Should we be looking at a typical bell curve here with regard to, this looks good? What should our expectation be with regard to what these results look like with the scale that's got this built-in sensitivity relative to the norm?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mr. Morris. And NIET does have that national research and I believe our own Louisiana data, since we do have a fair amount of systems. And some of our larger systems, Ascension has used the traditional rubric for years, Jefferson, Calcasieu. We have quite a few systems who have used the rubric for, some for a decade, as long as a decade. And it is a bell curve that you do see, whether it's at the national level or the districts here in our state who have used the rubric.
And I think we could pull some graphs for you, Mr. Morris, to show like what that has looked like nationwide where this has been implemented, and also our state data. So we're happy to also provide that.
I appreciate that, recognizing the sensitivity ahead of it, you're proactive, and set clear expectations. So really appreciate the messaging. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll note too that we, in our legacy system data, we're not seeing a bell curve. But we do expect that with the new system. So again, LEADS will have some familiar components from the former evaluation system and then some new additions. Remaining the same is that all evaluations will consist of a qualitative score worth 50% of the overall score and a quantitative score, or a student growth score, worth 50% of the overall score. So that did not change in the policy updates that you all approved a few months ago. For educators, observations will continue to be included in the evaluation process, and the Louisiana Educator rubric will now be used. In addition, educators will engage in reflection by completing a self-assessment. Principals, counselors, and non-principal leaders, such as assistant principals, will engage in conferences in place of observations, just like what was practiced in Compass. Artifacts and data will be collected throughout the year and used to score using the Louisiana Leader rubric or the Louisiana Counselor rubric, which will be reviewed during the conference. Self-assessment will also be included, but one note that principals will now have an additional component, the principal survey, which is aligned to the rubric and is given to their teachers to complete. So I wanted to just note a few things about each role that's represented in the new system. And the first that I'll touch on is counselor. Counselors will review previous and current data and meet with their evaluators to set goals at the beginning of the year. Then during the middle of the year conference, counselors will reflect on the progress toward goals and evaluators and provide coaching and feedback. This process is followed again for the end of year conference. And the counselor rubric really now centers around what the school counselor role is designed to do to support students with counseling. Our counselors, we know, play an important role in our schools, and too often they're given logistical and managerial work that does not allow them to spend the majority of their time counseling. And so this is very much in alignment with our Let Teachers Teach recommendations that asks for teachers to be freed from mental health responsibilities. I think oftentimes this can occur where more of that responsibility is placed on our teachers when our counselors' time is taken up by duties that are really not associated with student services and actually doing the counseling. And so the new counselor rubric outlines the duties of counselors around supporting students with counseling and encourages leaders to emphasize this important work. And that rubric includes domains like strategic goal setting, student services, the role that counselors have in leadership of a school, professionalism, and also their responsibilities around family and community engagement. The leader evaluation system is similar in that there is artifacts and data that are collected during the evaluation cycle throughout the year. And this is the same for principals and non-principal leaders, such as assistant principals. But to allow more support for new principals or those who are in need of additional support, there was some differentiation included in this policy as well, just like Dr. Brumley talked about the differentiation in the teacher policy. So for our principals with more than 3 years of experience and a 3.5 or higher in the previous year, their second performance review may be waived. And the new rubric for leaders is really in alignment with the high impact leader actions that we know our school leaders need to be engaging in to effectively run their schools. And this rubric includes around principals setting their mission, vision, and goals for their schools. It includes a lot of components around instructional leadership, curriculum and teacher effectiveness, coaching teachers. It also includes school operations and management, and again, that school and community environment and engagement. And so, once again, it is a much more comprehensive rubric than the legacy system had. And just a little bit about our teacher component of the evaluation system. A goal of this is that we provide differentiated support for evaluatees, like Dr. Brumley talked about. So on this slide, you see the breakdown that our new teachers in the first 3 years of teaching will receive 3 observations. And then our teachers beyond 3 years of experience will receive their first observation. And if that first score is below a 3.5, a second observation will be conducted. And if the average of the first 2 observations is less than a 2.5, then that would require a third observation. So this means our highest performing teachers would receive 1 observation, and our teachers who are either new or struggling the most will receive up to 3 observations in a year. This differentiation will allow for our administrators to focus attention on our new teachers and on those most in need, while ensuring our effective teachers still receive that targeted feedback, but they can continue focusing on their efforts on student growth. As I talk with a lot of principals around the state, I'm hearing for the most part that there is a lot of balance in how their schools, now that they were in school for the most part, and they are really starting to look at their numbers, how many new teachers, how many highly effective teachers do I have coming into this school year? And they are, I think, for the most part, finding balance, that they're still averaging about 2 observations per teacher. I think there are, of course, some anomalies to this, and we do maybe have some schools that end up with more observations than in the past if they have a large number of new or struggling teachers. And so we've happily been working with those schools and school systems who may have more. But oftentimes, I also think those are schools who are maybe staffed a little differently because they already have some particular challenges. So they maybe have additional roles like instructional coaches and master teachers who can also assist with the work. And the rubric for our teachers is a very robust and comprehensive rubric that includes many different components of instruction, things like motivating students, providing feedback, lesson pacing, our teachers' content knowledge. It also includes the component of planning, how the teacher sets their classroom environment, and that new component of professionalism. So the next 2 slides, I really want to just dive in a little bit to why and how I think this rubric can make such a difference. It sets that common language and understanding of what great instruction looks like, and it really can result in deep student learning. Highly effective instruction moves beyond foundational student engagement. This rubric was really developed to support a shift from student engagement to student ownership of learning, and you see that here on this slide. It's beyond students doing the work, which you would see in a proficient classroom, but also moves students toward understanding their learning and engaging in the cognitive work of learning. And it goes beyond just a student thinking, my teacher said I had to do this, so I am doing it. Ultimately, that's what we want, for our students to take ownership of their learning, have that motivation to learn, and make their own real life, real world connections to be able to articulate what they are learning, why they are learning it, and how they will know if they are successful. So the rubric and the goals are very lofty ones, and they are meant to be that way. So you see here the breakdown between doing, understanding, and owning when we think about student learning. When students are doing learning, the instruction is at the proficient level. The educator would be directing the learning for the majority of the lesson. this would be considered rock solid and effective. This would be a proficient teacher. But then you'll notice, as we move forward in this progression of learning, students move to the next level. This is what our previous rubric was missing. This is what was lacking, what comes beyond proficiency. And so this is why we'll, see score shift. We'll see that bell curve occur now that we haven't seen in the past. So you'll notice as we move forward, students move to then understanding, and the educator shifts to a more facilitation approach. Students begin to shift from just procedurally engaging in the learning to a level of ownership. And then that level 5, that exemplary level on the rubric, the teacher and the students co-facilitate their learning, and students are truly owning their learning and are able to share what they have learned, apply and extend their learning, and take responsibility on their learning. So I wanted to note here that the goals are very lofty in this rubric. It's meant to be that way. This rubric is designed that way. But we do have guidance and training on what this looks like across grade levels, across content areas, across student groups. So no one has been left out as we consider every learning environment that we have across the state. We are trying to address through guidance and training and support what this rubric looks like as it is implemented across all of those different learning settings with different student groups.
Dr. Chesson, if I'd add right here, I want to just point out too that within the different indicators, a teacher may fluctuate as well. So you can see their strengths, maybe their areas for refinement. And then I think it's also worth noting, just to emphasize again, Dr. Chesson, how the evaluators have to go through a rigorous instructional cycle to be prepared, and then have to demonstrate that preparedness before they're able to evaluate.
Absolutely. We want our evaluators to be very comfortable and also very competent as they are using these new tools to observe and ultimately evaluate our educators. So the next step following the observation is the post-conference plan. And a post-conference plan did exist in our previous system, but this is a much more prescriptive post-conference plan, and policy says that this needs to take place within 5 school days following the date of the observation, and that's because that data will go cold. Teachers will forget what happened in that particular lesson. It's difficult for you to reflect on something that happened weeks ago. And so it should happen within that 5-day span, and the educator will engage with their observer in a post-conference. And the educator will really be encouraged to reflect on their lesson, and the observer will share feedback on one specific area of reinforcement, something that the teacher did very well that had a high impact on student learning, and one area of refinement that if changed, if tweaked, if adjusted, would have had a greater impact on student learning. More kids would have learned, more kids would have mastered the standard, kids would have been more successful in that lesson if this one thing could change and have an impact on student learning. And so that takes place during the post-conference. This is what provides actionable feedback to inform adjustments in practice. It will look differently depending on the level of teacher effectiveness, and so if you have a highly effective teacher, this post-conference is going to look much more collaborative in nature. If you have a brand new novice teacher who maybe has less knowledge they're bringing in, it may look a little more prescriptive in those situations, but it always will promote self-reflection between that teacher and then support from the leader. And so what's different next is that aftermath from the post-conference, because it doesn't end there. What comes out of the post-conference and the next step is the transfer into the classroom, because an observation should not just be this one-time event that doesn't then have a meaningful impact on the instruction that comes next. And so previous to this policy shift, teachers completed professional growth plans per policy at the beginning of the year. And these had become very compliance-oriented and oftentimes did not drive true growth in teachers. And this aligns again directly with a recommendation from the Let Teachers Teach work group, who asked us to please tailor professional growth plans so that they weren't just another burden, another piece of documentation that teachers have to complete at the beginning of the year that really don't mean that much to them. And so we've now tied the professional growth plan into that post-conference. And so now PGPs will be incorporated into the coaching plan as the leader and teacher collaborate around that area of refinement and some next steps. Each observation will result in that PGP. These plans are individualized based on the refinement area. And again, highly reflective teachers may identify their own actions towards improvement during the post-conference. And then the number of actions and the type of actions will vary based on the teacher's need. The other piece of follow-up that is very important, I think, in this new system is that in policy, a targeted informal observation will be conducted at least 2, but no more than 6 weeks following the post-conference. And again, that ensures that transfer into the classroom is occurring. So this image is the follow-up coaching and support cycle. The coaching cycle will always begin by identifying a student need. As we're conducting an observation, we are seeing what are the needs of the students, and we're connecting that to the teacher's refinement. There's always a relationship between teacher actions and student learning. For this, we have to think about how improvement in the refinement area will positively impact student learning. And this all will drive student learning. This observation rubric is very focused on what students are learning. Our previous rubric was a lot about what teachers are saying and doing. But this really centers around what is the quality of the student work? What evidence exists that students mastered the standard? When we look at what students learned or didn't learn, we can compare that to what occurred during instruction and identify what change would have had maximum impact on student learning. And this becomes the area of refinement. So finally, what's to come as we continue the support for the rollout of LEADS? We still have 23 training opportunities remaining for this fall. We have over 90 training opportunities altogether that kicked off back in June. We have 48 on-site visits that will support this upcoming school year, monthly webinars, our LEADS monthly newsletter. We have office hours for tech support with our new data system that will capture all this information. We have asynchronous trainings available in our professional learning platform, and we'll continue to walk hand in hand and support our school systems, our leaders, and our educators in their implementation of LEADS. We know that nothing new comes without a learning curve, and that learning takes time. But research tells us the best way to improve teacher practice is through observation and coaching with high-quality feedback. So we are very assured that this is the way to improve teacher practices, and we're excited about this common language and understanding of best instructional practices that we now have as a state. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you for a great presentation. I have a question. Can we put together a 5-point scale video for teachers that exemplifies each one of the rating scale categories? And let me just say, let me explain what I mean. So if I have a teacher who thinks they're proficient or highly effective, but they're actually emergent, I can say, look at the video so you can see the difference and what it actually means, because we have different type of learners even as adults. And so sometimes it means looking at that video of what is proficient. And when I look at the different categories of understanding to doing to owning, it would exemplify what that means to a teacher and how do you get that rating, because sometimes they think that proficiency and that they're actually doing student-facilitated classrooms, and it's not. So I'm just thinking maybe as a model for teachers, that might be something I would go home and look at and start practicing to make sure that I'm like, okay, I get it. Just something that's universal across the state.
That is a wonderful idea, and a video library is part of our professional learning plan.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we have some cards. I'm going to ask that you please come to the mic. You have 3 minutes to speak. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
I think you're down there first.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
Mr. Appel.
That's all right, I'm way down here in the corner.
It's okay.
I'm just curious, and I understand we still are, the data you would have would be under the old Compass system, but can we get a summary report by, say, district of the rankings of teachers? So we have an idea as Bessie of, I'm here all the time, people complaining that we have terrible teachers, and I don't believe that. But I don't have any way to justify it. So if we could get like a summary report it might be very useful, and it would help us in a public relations perspective.
We're happy to provide that. We do have that from our legacy system.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris? I'm sorry.
I did just want to say I had the opportunity to be observed on this rubric this year, and one of my little things I did, Reach University, I spoke to some Reach University students, and they watched one of my lessons, and then they picked me apart with the rubric, but it was so great, because I think one of the things I've felt before is I felt like I was kind of putting on a show when I was observing. I was like, I got to say this, I got to say that, and this rubric was just all about my kids, and I don't stand up and teach in front of my kids a lot, and I just found it really refreshing that it was so student focused. So I think I just wanted to say, as someone who's now been observed on both, that I'm really excited for the changes to come.
Thank you, Aldo. Great job. All right, so we have cards. Ms. Carly, come on up. Amber Jackson, Angel Maxey, please state your name and if you're representing an organization. And we have 3 minutes per person.
Dr. Clark, I wanted to get Dr. Chase on back before we close this one out.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Amber Jackson. I work at LSU for BR Bites in curriculum development. But on this particular topic, I'm making a personal appeal as a tenure educator. Some things I noticed about the new system that I felt like could be commented on. First, I understand the want and need for a professionalism component. I am concerned that I did not see a definition of what professionalism looks like in the classroom, and am afraid it could be interpreted by those decision makers to include bias. And I just want to make sure, I'm curious as to what's in the rubric on the professionalism component that would not lead to bias. If you consider not that long ago, it was considered unprofessional for female teachers to come to work without pantyhose on. We don't want these types of biases to be in our data continued. And so just being very careful how to include that and make sure that we maybe even include a list of things that are not allowed to be, make sure as an administrator, you are not taking these things into consideration when rating somebody's professionalism. Speaking of things that were missing from the legacy compass, that is still missing that I think should be included is a student survey where at the college level, at the end of every term, students rate their teachers, they rate their professors, and the schools are able to use that to be like, this professor might be getting a little too handsy with students too much. This professor is not relating to their students. And if we're going to take the opinion of the evaluators that are in the classroom 2 or 3 times for our qualitative data, I think it's just as important. We've been talking about start with the students. It's just as important to get the student data on that. And I realize it's a lot of data because one teacher would have responses from, 100 students? But that's the beauty of, we have large language models that could aggregate that data for you almost immediately and could tell you which teachers are maybe flagged for concern, which would also help with accountability. You could also see which teachers are getting good scores from their administrators, but the students are saying, this teacher didn't teach anything all year. So I think that would be a really good check and balances system to compare the student surveys and the Compass scores. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Angel Maxey, and I'm a 3rd grade math and science teacher at Cherokee Elementary School in Rapides Parish. This will be my 7th year using the original NIET Educator rubric. Over my 20 years of education, I've been judged and observed over using many different rubrics. This rubric, though, is very student-centered. I believe there are a couple of things that I really like about this rubric. The first is student ownership. If you read closely, this rubric mentions student ownership many times. These are powerful words, and as educators, we have to teach our students how to take ownership in their learning. And in turn, it requires me to reflect on my craft and take ownership for the things that I'm doing in the classroom and how I'm growing those students. The second component that I'm in support of is the differentiation it provides. I'm required to differentiate instruction for my students in the classroom, and I feel like we also need to do that for our educators. We need to differentiate our coaching and our growth that we offer them. When I reflect on my craft and think about how I'm going to grow my students, it allows me to give intentional support to the students that need it most. And it's going to also allow these administrators to give that intentional support to educators that need that. I believe this rubric will allow our leaders to grow students in the areas that they need, and it will allow educators to grow just as much in the areas that they need. So thank you for allowing me this time today.
Thank you, Ms. Maxey. Yes, Mr. Appel.
Real quick question. No, I wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
Down here, way down here.
Way down here.
I'm just curious, do you, in your discussions with other teachers, do you find that they take offense to being interviewed and reviewed and checked on, or do they take it as a positive thing to help them improve their abilities?
Absolutely. You're helping to create the instructional coaching piece and the professional growth plan. And so I feel like it gives me more of a say. I know when we were using different rubrics before, I really didn't have a say in anything, and I wasn't sure how to use the feedback because it wasn't really clear on how I could improve my craft to become a better teacher. And I feel like with this rubric, you do have a say. When you go into that post-conference, they ask you these questions about your lesson and what did you do to do this, and do you feel like you did this? And if there's evidence for that, I can definitely back that up and say, well, I did this, and it does give you more of a say.
So do you feel like amongst your peers, they all have the same sort of feelings? Or
I really do. I've got some friends at many schools I've been at, and ever since we switched to this, I feel like teacher morale is better because you do feel like you have a say in how you are going to be coached and led and grown into a better teacher.
Well, thank you. I sure appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Appel. Thank you. Ms. Corley?
I'm very curious as to, 5 minutes, I'm a organization.
It went down to 3.
Oh, you moved it to 3, okay, I'm gonna make it quick then, I'm gonna hit my points. I didn't hear where you actually include parental engagement as something to be evaluated. We have a lot of children with disabilities, and part of being an educator, I was taught, coming from a family full of educators, that a parent is the child's first teacher. And so if the parent is the child's first teacher, then we need to evaluate how the teacher is making sure that we have a system or a line of communication with the family so that they can continue that education at home. And so it's important that we make sure that teachers are evaluated on how they are going about with communicating with the family so that there is a continuous line of communication on educating that child when they go from being educated in the classroom to being educated at home on the same exact skills. Second, I did not see anything that specified what it would look like for an evaluation of a teacher that have a class of over 30 kids. So many times, those teachers are critiqued at the same level, but you forget that when they're dealing with over 30 kids, what exactly does that look like, and how exactly are you supposed to make sure that they are reaching every single child in that classroom? That's something that you definitely need to take into consideration. And third, what does evaluation look like for teachers that are teaching kids in a best class, which is a combination of kids that are that have a disability and regular ed kids. And fourth, what it look like for what it look like for an evaluation on the staff that are educating children in a self-contained. Right now, I know of a teacher that has 9 severe profound kids in her classroom. What does that look like when according to the standards, she only supposed to have 5? So I'm asking for us to really look like what the evaluation piece is going to look like and how we're going to marginalize or we're going to disproportionately criminalize some teachers, weaponize them with this actual evaluation tool. But also this evaluation tool was so long that I think everybody probably forgot what some of it said, and that we really needed the little short video, like you said, and a digest like they do as it relates to legislation. So please give us a very much short version of that so that people can do it, because we know that everybody don't learn on a college level, but they mostly learn on the 8th grade level and sometimes a 4th grade level. And I actually will welcome any questions, comments, and concerns you may have, but definitely we need to make it where it is equitable, and it wasn't equitable.
Thank you, Ms. Carly. Next, we have Kim Lord, Dr. Johnson, and Dr. Baker. Please come up. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Latasha Johnson. I am the Federal Program Supervisor / Instructional Support Partner in Ascension Parish. I had the privilege of participating in the LEADS pilot as a district leader in Ascension. Through the pilot, our district was able to give and receive valuable feedback to the LDOE around the LEADS evaluation system. Monthly, we had meetings with the LDOE to discuss new learnings and to help them refine the process. The Louisiana Educator Advancement and Development System provided a clear framework for leadership and teaching. Both tools, the LER and LLR, established a common language across our district, which we previously used in NIET Teaching and Learning Standards rubric for many years. It emphasizes evidence-based evaluations, which shifted discussions from general conversations with leaders to focused, evidence-driven support. This is particularly important for retaining early career teachers who often leave due to inadequate support. The new tiered observation cycles, which offer more frequent observations for novice teachers and teachers who struggle, aim to address this issue and enhance their development. During the pilot, I worked closely with the principal to implement the Louisiana Leader rubric. As her leadership coach, we were able to link her leadership actions to coaching plans and student outcomes. We included students who did not meet goals in the coaching plans. This allowed us to be very intentional about providing support around teacher refinement areas from the post-observation. We monitored student outcomes weekly through student work in instructional leadership, and as we began to monitor work, we began to notice as teachers improved in their practice, in their refinement areas, student outcomes also improved. This cycle of continuous improvement provided me opportunities to coach the leader through thoughtful questioning while collecting evidence of impact. By focusing leadership actions on areas for teacher improvement and monitoring progress, we saw notable gains. The school experienced a 5-point increase in the academic index this school year. If LEADS can positively impact that school, one leader, 40 teachers, and 554 students, imagine its potential across the entire state of Louisiana. I'm excited about the future and the continued growth for our leaders and teachers, and most importantly, for student learning.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Ms. Lord?
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Lord. I am the principal at Cherokee Elementary in Alexandria. I serve a population of about 600 inner-city students, the majority of who come from a minority or poverty-riddled background. Many of our students come from less than desirable living conditions and a wide variety of educational support at home, but all of them deserve the chance to grow to their maximum potential. I am entering my 4th year as principal, my 7th year as an administrator, and my 18th year as an educator. Currently, I serve 48 teachers, including special needs programs and English language learners. While being a principal is slightly different than teaching in the classroom, the premise is still the same. Instead of teaching children to grow, I am teaching adults to grow. With that, it is important for us to remember that the best practices of teaching do not change regardless of the age of the human being. We are teaching teachers. With the implementation of the new Louisiana Educator rubric, we are showing that our priority is to help teachers grow. We can no longer live by the old adage, well, teachers taught it, so our students should have learned it, right? We must turn our focus to the impact that instruction has on our students. The kids that we teach have the opportunity to grow when our teachers are properly supported. The LER takes the focus off of the teacher actions and places it on student outcomes. This rubric directly correlates the teaching practices, lesson planning, and assessment to student output. What work are they producing? Are they learning and mastering the standards? If this is what we are expecting of our teachers with our students, then the expectations shouldn't be any different for my impact as an instructional coach of teachers. In addition to the improvements in the actual rubric, the LER has implemented the coaching plan. Some of the biggest issues expressed to me over the years is that teachers are doing their absolute best. If they knew how to do it better, they would. The coaching plan is doing just that. We are developing a differentiated plan together, as Ms. Maxey said, to help them grow. With the LER, I'm working with each teacher individually to give specific strategies, plans, and follow-up to help our teachers grow. We are providing them with the skills and a plan to help them feel successful. It is my job as an administrator to ensure that I am doing the absolute best for the students in my care. With the implementation of the new LER, I think we're finally taking a step in that direction. Will it add a little bit more to my plate? Maybe. But when you fill your plate with what really matters, it never gets too full. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lord. Dr. Baker?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Richard Baker, Louisiana Federation of Teachers and School Employees. I agree that this is better than Compass. In our survey, we asked teachers and school employees what they wished administrators and elected officials knew about recruitment and retention. Below is one of more than 1,300 comments that were submitted. We are professionals who deserve trust, autonomy, and decision-making power in schools. We deserve to have decision-making power with things that directly affect us and our students. We deserve to have leaders of good character that come from our profession, our community, and represent us and our student body. We deserve to see our community and students in what we teach. We deserve much better pay. We deserve to ask of students what is developmentally appropriate. We deserve to let our kids be kids. We deserve to have time to stay current on current world events. We deserve time for ongoing research and development in what we're interested. We deserve time and space to be creative with our instruction as we incorporate STEAM into lessons. Trust us to do our job. That was from a teacher. Teachers are asking for more than a better evaluation tool. They want more support for students. They want smaller class sizes. They want a salary that allows teaching to be the only job they need to make ends meet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Any other discussions or questions from the board? Mr. Morris, nothing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple questions for Dr. Chason, if she's still available.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Chason. So first of all, personally, I just thought the feedback was fantastic from the stakeholders, just across the board, particularly with the student-centered focus on student outcomes. So I just think that's fantastic going forward. It's a win-win for everybody. Couple of points from the testimony that we got. I was really interested if there's anything in the best practices you've seen from other sites with implementation of this policy relative to the comment about student feedback. Is that relevant in K through 12 education? I appreciate the comment at higher ed. But I'm just curious, in K through 12 education, is there any experience in that space with regard to student feedback?
Are you referring, Mr. Morris, to like a student survey to be a component of the evaluation system? Yes.
Or independent? I'm just curious if there's any conversation there about any value placed on student feedback in the K through 12 space.
It is something that we explored with NIET early on, and we did consider that within the early stages of the pilot, and ultimately decided that the research and the recommendations that came from them was that there was limited value from student feedback to inform a system. And we kind of went through other states who had tried something like this. But in the early stages of the pilot, it was something that we very much considered and ultimately made the decision to not include it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it was considered. Other comment I had based on the feedback we got was I really appreciated the comment about professionalism, and let's define that so it's not ambiguous and we don't have clear expectations. So I appreciate that. And then my initial question was regard to the process itself. I didn't hear anything about career pathways. So I'm just curious, in the teaching profession, consideration for career pathways, how that's developed, how that's considered on an individual level. Is that part of this teacher assessment process? Is that something different? How do you help a teacher recognize their strengths with regard to whether or not they might want to pursue something in regard to say a master teacher or a virtual teacher or an administrative type role? Where does that come into this process, or does it?
It does. It absolutely does. So you heard me say on one of the first few slides that this is really a missing piece of our teaching and learning vision that's being solved by the implementation of this system. And one of the things that we've put in place over the last few years are what we call our professional learning structures, instructional leadership teams that work together to run instruction in our schools, teacher collaboration, which are this job-embedded sacred time and space for our teachers to come together and plan for their instruction, and then building career pipelines is a part of that as well. That's what we would refer to that as. And that's really about elevating the voice of our teacher leaders and letting our teacher leaders serve on that instructional leadership team as a part of it in some capacity. And this is a great opportunity when our school leaders enter into classrooms. This is a great opportunity for them to see that talent, to highlight that talent and look for potential, and then really mentor and foster a person's growth. And so being in those classrooms, the observation and feedback cycle is a great time for our leaders to spend more time around instruction with our teachers and identify those teacher leaders that can then become a part of coaching other educators, serving as a voice for teachers on the instructional leadership team. So that is all absolutely a part of this larger system.
Any other questions or concerns? Any objections? Motion passes. Next item.
The next item is on page 92, item 6.1, consideration of executive session regarding discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of a person. The recommendation is to convene executive session.
Can I get a motion to go into executive session, Mr. Berkins and Mr. Appel? Is there any public comment or board discussion on this matter before we go into executive session? In order for this motion to pass, 2/3 affirmative vote of members present is required. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Appel? Yes. Dr. Armstrong? Yes. Mr. Birkin? Yes. Mr. Castile? Yes. Ms. Champagne? Yes. Mr. Harris? Not present. Mr. Hollis? Not present. Ms. Holloway? Yes. Ms. Mellorine? Yes. Mr. Morris? Yes. Dr. Clark?
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. We will be in executive session for the time necessary for the discussion. No votes will be taken while the committee is in executive session. All votes will be made in public. Additionally, public disclosure is not required of matters discussed in properly held executive sessions. At this time, the Educator Effectiveness Committee meeting stands in recess to go into executive session. The order of the agenda to vote on the items discussed in our executive session. Mr. Appel and Mr. Perkins, thank you very much. Next item.
Your next item is on page 93. Item 6.2, consideration of a records review regarding the reinstatement of a Louisiana teaching credential appropriate to the credentials of Mr. Cedric Lewis. The recommendation is to grant, deny, or defer.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that item 6.1, A through H, be grant reinstatement in globo.
So that would be 6.2 through 6.9.
Yes.
Yes.
We need a second.
Can I get a second? Mr. Hollis?
Any opposition?
Any opposition? Comments, concerns, or discussion? Motion passes.
That concludes your agenda.
Congratulations to our reinstated people.
We need 10 minutes to start sit.